This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast coming to you Wednesday evening. It's September 25th, and the plan for tonight is for Kyle and I to get into burning questions or thoughts that we have in advance of Wolves training camp, which starts next week. We just kind of came up with one big one, I guess, that we're gonna discuss back and forth, the two of us, and then we're gonna ask those of you listening live here on YouTube for your questions. Our producer, Cooper Carlson, is lurking in the background here. He's going to kind of gather or flag good questions throughout the episode, and we'll get to those after Kyle and I kind of just talk for a while to fill some time before getting to your questions. I think this will be fun, something we want to do more of this season. I'm seeing a bunch of people saying Nasreed in the comments already, so we're back. Kyle, 5 days till training camp. Are you ready?
Not until today. I don't know if it was you already had Britt on, and I know you're going to have Britt on again at the end of the week. But those 4 kind of segments that he did with Finch did kind of bring the juices back and kind of revitalize. I know Media Day you and I will be at, which is this upcoming Monday, September 30th, and then they kick things off that Tuesday with training camp, and then it's a week from this Friday that they have their first preseason game on October 4th. So I'm still very much run the ball, fantasy football, all that stuff, really football mode. But Britt kind of broke me and brought me back to talking about Wolves. And I think after reading those 4 things and getting 70 minutes of 2 of the smartest people I know talking about hoops, there actually are some really interesting things to start thinking about as they tip off here in about a week.
100%. Before we get to your question quick, I just want to let everyone listening here know that this episode is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company. And I want to let you know that we will be participating in hosting Wolves Fest at Falling Knife again this year. It's October 19th, which is kind of a perfect date. It's a Saturday right before the season starts in LA on October 22nd. The fest starts at 3 p.m. We'll be there kind of hanging out. They're going to have different Wolves vendors that they're planning on putting together there. And then kind of by 5 p.m., Britt and I will do a live podcast, and the two of us will talk. We'll be ready for the season. And then we'll take questions. We'll kind of have training camp in the bag by then. So it'll be our last podcast we do before a game. So it should be a blast. And also it's cool. They are releasing a special beer for the event called Second Apron that Kyle and I have been working with them on. So yeah, it's gonna be the start of the season. So keep that down on your calendars, October 19th, and go for the Lynx playoffs games to Falling Knife as well. But definitely come to Wolves Fest on October 19th at Falling Knife Brewing Company and drink some Second Apron. You want to kick it off with your question, Kyle?
Let's just go back to we're kind of ramping ourselves up, right? We got 70 minutes of Finch on the record and Britt. Just thinking about things. We've talked enough about Rob Dillingham and what his role will be or his size or whatever, replacing Kyle Anderson with Joe Ingles. There are a lot of questions, I think, entering training camp that will be answered but are interesting. But I just keep coming back to a big one that is, who are the 2 best players on the team? Anthony Edwards and Karl-Anthony Towns. I think that's self-explanatory. No debate there. Why don't they play well together?
Well,
and that's not my question. My question would be, as we read these things from Britt and Finch and we move forward to unlocking the offense a little bit and kind of getting that to more of a contender level offense as this team still relies on their defensive identity. How do you get more out of that pairing is my big question entering training camp.
I think it's the more part. It's not that they didn't play well together last season. And my question is kind of about defense, and I was looking at some other, just for doing the pod with Britt on Friday, just a lot of defensive stuff, and just kind of refreshing myself with the notion, the truth that Karl-Anthony Towns was pretty good on defense last season. Mm-hmm. And so it would be, I guess if Cat would have kind of had one of his normal defensive seasons, then I think it would be fair to say man, I wish there was more that Cat would have done defensively this season. And I wish there's more that they would have got out of the Cat and Ant pairing. but they were the 1 seed for the majority of the season. They were the number 1 defensive team in the league for the season because the Cat and Ant defensive pairing was good last season. Obviously, like Jaden and Rudy are the best defenders, right? And Mike kind of holds everything together. But those were the 2 players at this 12 months ago, like today when we would have been talking about this. I've been like, Ant's super inconsistent defensively, and Cat at the 4 chasing, right? Remember, there was all that sort of stuff. They acquitted themselves well in that area, but it is crazy to think about how good of a season the Wolves had last year without it being like Cat and Ant were this dynamic offensive duo together. They weren't. If we just talk about that 2-man pairing, you sent me something like 25 minutes ago. You're like, hey, do you have any like pick and roll Cat and Ant stuff? And I did this quickly, but this one was crazy to me. I haven't told you this yet. Cat only shot 44 pick and pop threes last season. But he made 26 of them. This is according to Synergy's like pick and roll tracking data. That's a 59% from 3 when he shot pick and pop threes.
Confirmed.
Yeah, you just did that on there. But then I was just like kind of scrolling through. I'm like, all right, 26 makes like, who are they assisted by? And only 8 of them were assisted by Ant. Again, this is according to Synergy's like tracking stuff. So it's not always perfect, but in general, right? Like Cat was not the pick and pop threat that he would have been, which when you just kind of think about Cat and Ant together, that's the perfect thing. Like Ant's this downhill juggernaut, and Cat's of this generation, one of, if not the best, floor spacing bigs. Why wasn't there that synergy last season? And I think your question points to the idea of like, look how much more, how much better this could be last year. Cause that was just super mid last year, right? Of just like, however those 2 guys played in tandem together with the offense. It's a if we could bet over-unders on like where they're going to rank offensively this year, right there, all you would need to do to argue like that they're going to be an above average offense this season, which they weren't last year, is be like, yeah, can they just get a little bit more out of the Cat and Ant pairing? And I would be surprised if they don't, right? Like, why can't that happen again? What do you think the likelihood is that we see or get more of that?
Well, that's a double-edged sword of, do I think it'll be beneficial, or what is the likelihood? What is the likelihood? Yeah. I don't know. Like, we'll see. But I also then counter to you, do you think this team can truly elevate this offense that was, as you termed it, mid last year without, the 2 best players on the team having an increased chemistry? Like, I mean, it's pretty selfish on my part to just try to go to what Denver does with Jokic and Murray, who maybe have the best 2-man game in the league. But that's a pretty dynamic thing, not only for just trying to elevate this offense, but I keep coming back to like late game stuff where you kind of have a my turn, your turn type thing with those guys. And it's like, can you imagine how much of that late game stuff that Finch even kind of referenced to Britt of like, we got to clean that up. Right. And it was a bugaboo for them, not only in the regular season, but, you could argue that's maybe why they fell apart in the Mavs series. If you just had your 2 best offensive players running offensive plays or sets down the stretch, like that seems like something that, will it happen? I would probably hope so, because Finch is really smart, but if it does happen, like that just seems like the easiest way to elevate some of this stuff. And also to your numbers, I don't know what's more concerning, the 44 or the 8, but 44 pick and pop threes. I mean, going back to what you and I always say, like we'd love for Carl to take 8 threes a game. Aren't those some of the easiest ones for him to just set a screen, take 2 steps back, and just catch and shoot?
Well, and it's like, all right, if we're guarding against Cat and Ant, like most teams are going to guard against the Ant downhill and pick and roll, right? Exactly. Like, what are you going to, they say, pick your poison. Well, like a lot of teams are going to pick the poison of Ant. It's not like, it is not a complicated action, right? A pick and pop. And it's not one that should be hard to get Cat open or decently open in. And I thought it was just like really, and again, why I appreciate the Britt Finch interview that you're talking about is Finch just put it in like such like blunt terms of like, yeah, they got to do it. You know, there's just like these,
Yeah.
he just like listed off some really basic things they can do. One of them was the pick and pop, where he's talking about like if there's gap help for Ant when he's driving. Well, if Cat's one pass away, you know, you just, and if that's where the gap helps come from, you just go into the gap help and there's Cat. You know, like the gap help guy can't guard Cat and be the gap help. So it's just, I was thinking about it from the sense of like, all right, so Finch, you made that really sound like that's all on those two. Right.
Yeah, right.
But like at some point, I guess I'm trying to talk about whose fault is it that it didn't happen before? Or whose fault is it going to be that it happens again? I think like Ant and Cat will get some pattern recognition of like, oh yeah, this does work. This pick and pop thing here worked, or this slip action, whatever it is. But at some point they need to be held accountable that they have to do it, right? And that's where it's on all three of them, Finch, Cat, and Ant, to make that happen. And I think they could put their heads together and like agree to come together and do that, because it's the most obvious solution, right, for making this offense better, and making this offense better makes you a contender, right? It
just kind of seems like they, like in podcast form, to use that analogy, like they just take turns doing a monologue when they kind of are on offense. And it would be great if Cat and Ant like had a real conversation where like they're both engaged. Right. So, there are probably a couple players that you would think would be a better pick and roll partner for Ant. But if you were just kind of drafting them in a snake draft, like how many guys would you be like, hey, you know what? I'll take him over Carl. I mean, I just keep coming back to like just their two-man action and what that opens up. Like, yeah, Ant needs to have more chemistry with Rudy, but if I had to pick one guy that I would just, in a certain play late in the fourth, that I would rather him run a set with, It would be Carl. Because
it's like, so that you're like, if somebody wanted to argue like, actually, I don't think the best type of pick and roll partner for Ant is a pop guy. It's a roll guy. Well, got one of those too, like you got the best lob threat guy also. So I think it should just be a goal of the season, obviously, to make Ant more dynamic in pick and roll. Also, when I was looking up those numbers, like 990 total pick and rolls last year. Like these are possessions where he shoots it, turns it over. By Ant.
Okay.
Shoots it, turns it over, or passes it into a shot, right? 58% of those shot or turnover himself. 27% of them into a spot up, or he passes it to somebody who spots up for a three. Only 11% went to the roll man in that situation, and 3% of them went to a cutter. The majority should not be shots, should not be him doing something himself, shot or turnover, right? And I was like, what was Mike's like? And it was like even. It was, and obviously Mike's not the downhill threat that Ant is, but his was pretty much like 33% of the time him, 33% of the time spot up, 33% of the time roll man, and there's, again, different players, but I do think if I had to pick a person it's most on, it's Ant, because he's the one with the ball, in his hands.
And maybe this is just a slip up. I think it's okay for a born scorer for it to still be the majority of the time, but maybe we just need to decrease that majority from whatever you said, 58, 59% to like 51%.
50. Yeah, sure.
Right, you know what I mean? Like 50%, even if you're dividing it by more than two. So yeah, and you guys, again, to reference it maybe for the last time, you and Britt kind of talked about this, but I also think my burning question entering training camp, entering the preseason, entering the regular season is a real issue, but I'm not necessarily pointing blame at any one person. Like you said, like I think Finch has to also hold them accountable of like, hey, if you're the super duper star and you're the best shooting big man of all time, which again, the Wolves social posted today, it's like, you guys should probably do stuff together. That would maybe alleviate some of our issues. But I also do think it kind of circles back on Ant a little bit. You said this with Britt, like super duper stardom isn't just always scoring. I always just reference that Devin Booker thing when all of a sudden he just started averaging 7 assists a game. Like that's the next. Ant can score 30 a game any night in 82 games. But if he can start getting 7 assists a game, 8 assists a game, lowering that majority from 58 to 51 or whatever, but getting everyone else involved, including Carl, maybe that's how we get what we've always wanted, right? Carl taking 8 threes a game, Rudy hitting just more dunks and not flashing for the post. So that's going to be really interesting to me, because I kind of just enter training camp, and I know we're going to go to you now, but I kind of entered training camp just being like, yeah, you lost Kyle, you added some young guys, one of them's kind of small, whatever. I still think this team's going to be just nails on defense every night.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's good. Let's get that into my question. I will say to people here live on YouTube, that was Kyle's question. I'm going to do a question now, and then we're going to get into probably just rapid fire. I'm seeing a bunch of questions coming through here on the side thing that I can't pay attention to, but Cooper's in the background flagging those. My question, Kyle, I did send this, I emailed this to you earlier, but again, much like you, lock it back in on all this week. The question that you come to in your mind is like, all right, lost some defensive guys, replaced them with some probably not as good defensive players. And my question is just like, can Rudy be great again? Like elite defensively, with lesser defensive personnel around him than he had a season ago. And I think I raised my own hand. Like, I have been kind of worried about, we're talking about that training camp. Like, man, Rob Dillingham is small, and like you lose Nickeil Anderson and Joe Ingles is in there, like replaces him. You're losing some defensive points, right?
Yeah.
By losing those guys. But Nickeil Anderson was the 8th man. And, and like Monte Morris was the 9th man, and Rob Dillingham fills that. Like, one, that shouldn't be that big. But two, like, why were the Wolves great at defense last year? They're great at it because they were bought into it as a team. I don't see a reason why that won't happen again. And two, they were great at defense because Rudy was incredible. Like, obviously the defensive player of the year. Yeah, but like, I don't know. It feels like you even reference defensive player of the year, and people are like, that doesn't matter. But like watching it night after night. And again, I've been going through these numbers more so this week. It's nuts. The defensive stuff with Rudy, regardless of the pairing, like it was just, I was like, all right, no Nickeil Anderson. Well, you know what? The defensive rating when Nickeil Anderson and Rudy Gobert were on the floor was worse than when Rudy Gobert was on the floor without Nickeil Anderson. Do you know that? Like, I mean, they're both still good, but like, right. But it's not like Kyle completely changed it. Rudy was a great tent pole of the defense, irregardless of what the personnel around him was. And I think that's because the personnel was always bought into it. So like, yeah, Rob Dillingham's going to need to be bought into the defense. Joe Ingles is going to need to be Nickeil again, Nas again, all the guys, Carl again, Ant again. But why would we assume those guys, the incumbent guys, wouldn't be bought into defense again? And like Ingles and Dillingham just straight up aren't going to play, or not going to play much, if they're not bought into defense. So I think you're going to get that buy-in again. And so my question just is, can Rudy just do it again? Can he do 95% of what he did again? And the only real factor I think of there that would say no is age, or some sort of wear and tear that costs him. But I don't know. I don't think that's me like pumping anything up. When I just go and start parsing through these things, I'm like, yeah, there's a little bit less there defensively, but all the same main things are there, whether it be personnel, intention, style, whatever, to be a great defense again. So that's my question. Can Rudy sustain his defensive dominance again? But I don't know why the assumption to that question should be no.
I'm nitpicking you a lot. So I nitpicked on the 58% to 51%. When you texted me or sent me lesser defensive personnel, is it okay to be skeptical or push back on like, and Kyle was awesome. Nickeil Anderson was awesome defensively. I know he maybe left a lot on the table offensively, but defensively he was nails. Did they lose that much? And maybe that's what you're saying too, but it's like the Rob stuff you and I have hammered pretty hard about, that we're both taller than him, and maybe he's grown a little bit, and he, I know Mike said the other day that Rob's taller than Mike is or whatever. One thing that did impress me for being small and being 19, both short and just not a lot of weight on him, he kind of busted his ass in Summer League on defense, I thought. Like, he at least tried, and that might just be all they need, right? Because, again, yes, they lose Kyle and they may be replaced with some youth or more offensive-minded guys, but in the same vein, like, would you expect Jaden to do anything but take a step forward defensively?
Right. I mean, right. I think what he said, what Finch said in the thing is like, the only thing we're baking in is no regression, like right. We're not, I mean, how much do you want to expect to leap? Like how smart of an idea that is, but it shouldn't get worse. Like why would Jaden's defense get worse? Why would anything from Ant or Jaden or Nas, get worse when they're under 25 years old?
And this is a little pie in the sky. Now you're starting to like hope, but if you said at the top that Carl's coming off what we think was maybe his best defensive season, why wouldn't he just build off that and give you at least that again? Or I mean, I don't know. To answer your question, I think
it would be a lack of commitment. It wouldn't be the same commitment as last season. Not that that's not Carl specific, but that's everyone, right? Does Jaden just care less about defense next season? I guess that would be the argument that Jaden would be worse, but knowing Jaden, it's hard for me to picture Jaden McDaniels caring less about defense next season. But I don't know. I mean, I guess sometimes guys get the idea in their head like, oh, I want to up my scoring or whatever, and the care factor switches sides of the ball. But I don't know. It's hard for me. To your first thing, though, the Kyle point, I do think they'll miss Kyle.
I do too. Yeah.
And specifically to the defensive side of the floor, I think the place where Kyle was great was with the Rudy and Nas pairing. I think he made that work in a lot of ways. Remember 2 years ago, disaster. Like, can't play Rudy and Nas together. It was the worst. It was the worst two-man pairing. It was awesome last season. But I was looking it up. I mean, Kyle was out there with those two guys almost all the time, and he was a connector offensively and defensively with those two bigs out there. And we often complained about, Kyle at the three. I did that all year. He did have better numbers at the three than he did at the four last year. Kyle Anderson did. And I think it's because I think Kyle Anderson really understood the personnel that he was playing with in a major way. And that made a big difference, though his shooting cost the team. So I think you will obviously I think they'll miss Kyle Anderson more defensively than they will offensively. But it'll be interesting to see how it's replaced. I just don't think that simply pulling out the toothpick of Kyle Anderson defensively makes this whole thing crash.
And to kind of close on that, the one big thing that I keep coming back to is I have said for the last 2 years entering training camp that the roster that we're about to watch is the most talented Timberwolves team of all time. I thought it when they made the trade for Rudy. I thought they got even better last year. They're fully healthy or whatever. And then this year, they've injected, like, how many times has a team gone to the conference finals and then had a lottery pick? That's pretty rare.
Sure.
But I think last year's team really did benefit from continuity. So while you're replacing, let's just say, Kyle Anderson, Jordan McLaughlin with Rob Dillingham, Terrence Shannon Jr., Joe Ingles, how long will it take those guys to kind of get up to, and,
sure,
we'll talk about this later, but like Josh Minot's name, like Britt would ask Finch a question of like, hey, Finchy, like, where are you going to have dinner tonight? And then Finch would be like, have you heard about Josh Minot's summer? Like, unprovoked 4 different times. So I know he's been in the system, but he's also going to be kind of thrown to the wolves, no pun intended. So that would be the only concern, and maybe bakes into your lesser defensive, teammates or whatever. It's just these guys might not know how to play with Rudy, although obviously Joe Ingles had his history with him in Utah. So it'll be interesting, but the talent level, I think, is upgraded from the end of the Mavs series. So what can Finch and that coaching staff do to kind of get them all on the same page early on? Because, once game one starts, it's going to be, a lot of people are going to be coming from them now as the hunted rather than the hunter.
Cooper, we're going to start taking questions here. I'm just going to grab the first break, and then we'll just throw up a question on the screen, and Kyle and I will jump on it. Today's show is brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if you are in the market for buying or selling a home, you're going to need a realtor, and we would love it if you keep it in our little Wolves family here and hit up Adriana Lonick. You can go to thedancingrealtor.com is her website. You see that up on the screen right now. It's in the show notes, or you can call or text her at 715-304-9920. She's licensed in both Minnesota and Wisconsin. Just book a strategy session. It's free. Sit down and figure out what it is that you need to do, or how she can help you in your process. And if you do that, you will be entered to win Wolves tickets through her. If you are in the market for buying or selling a home, you're going to need some help, and we'd love it if you consider Adriana. Again, at thedancingrealtor.com, or by calling 715-304-9920. Today's show is also brought to you by Your Home Improvement Company. And if you are, you've got some last minute before winter comes, which it's coming, home improvement needs, hit up Your Home Improvement Company. You can go to yourhomeimprovementco.com or call 866-777-YHIC. Any type of home improvement project they can help you out on. But specifically for September, October, they have a deal on windows, buy two, get two free. And they also have a deal on a full tub to shower bathroom renovation, 30% off deal that they have going on. These are all done by certified professionals, and they have great financing deals if that's something that you need. Zero money down, zero interest, zero payments until 2026. Again, if you're thinking about home improvement project, you're going to need somebody there too. And we'd also love it if you keep it in the Wolves family. Again, that's Your Home Improvement Company. You can go to yourhomeimprovementco.com or call 866-777-YHIC. Your Home Improvement Company, where it's your home made better. All right, Cooper, you got a question for us? And anybody in the chat, just throw them in here, and Cooper will get them up on the screen. Kyle, I'll read this one. Or I guess it says to Dane.
It's addressed to you, sir.
Yeah. I feel like you've been assuming that Dillingham is going to struggle early on. If you come at it from the opposite lens, how do you manage minutes and expectations if he is good out the box? Well, I thought it was interesting, again, from the Finch Britt conversation, that Finch said a reasonable expectation for Rob Dillingham was to be good in every 3 games. So I don't even know if I would have gone that far down for struggles, but yeah, that was a great line, and that's a realistic expectation for a 19-year-old, right?
And hey, man, no one's more throughout the years been more glass half full than me. But that was when you get a coach to say that on the record. Again, I know we've now referenced it 9 times, but that article is just not something you read in the LA Times that JJ Redick did. Like, you don't really get that access to a head coach of a professional team. So again, shout out to Britt for working on that. But that kind of analogy, or that idea of we're just hoping that we get one in every 3 nights is really good. We'll figure out that bad, it's kind of like the porridge for the 3 Bears. Like, we just want one really good one, and then we'll worry about the other 2.
That's
so,
right.
to the question, I mean,
yeah, it could be better than that because he's saying reasonable.
Yeah, what a great problem to have. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure Finch would love if, holy bleep, like, I have to find more minutes for if we find out in mid-November, right? Like when they come out to Portland, that Rob Dillingham needs to play more minutes than we projected a month ago, the team will probably be like 12-2.
Right.
So that would be a good problem to have. How does it affect the rotation? Not to kind of jump on your answer here, but I just keep coming back to one of the reasons in my mind that I thought the team showed some weaknesses and lack of maturity and fell apart in the Maverick series was because Mike Conley was not fully healthy or running on fumes. And I think the team's best chance to get over that hump and to have a better season than a Western Conference Finals trip is they need Mike Conley on the floor in May and possibly June. So if Rob can get more minutes, I know there's a lot of context here that needs to kind of trickle down, but if Rob can eat into more of Mike's minutes early on in the season, to me, I don't know how that's anything but a good thing.
Yeah, and I mean, this actually triggers in my head of like, I want to look up, like, I mean, there are examples of, rookie point guards being good right away. Oftentimes, that's the position that takes the longest, right, to acclimate. I mean, you mentioned Portland. You think about Scoot Henderson. That one's still processing. But it could be, and maybe in a lesser role, like Finch made it sound like it's probably going to be like 15 minutes a night max for Dillingham, at least to start the season. But I think if it is good right away, it drastically changes my expectations for the offense as a whole. I don't know if that's what the question is really getting, but if I picture Dillingham being good, I pictured him giving this team what they've said they needed: a guy who can break the paint, who can get in there and provide another scoring option, another guy who can get in and just get into the middle of the lane and either take a floater or distribute from there. Another guy who, if you have to put 2 on the ball on him and he's going to, then they're going to get them playing, he's going to hit cat on the roll, and now you're playing 4-on-3 on the backside. If you have that, I mean, if you get that, it's impossible that this team is a below average offensive team. And so to me, that would completely change my framing of how I would view the rest of the season. Because I don't know, I'm sure we'll do this at some point in training camp. like predict where the Wolves will finish offensively. And I don't know. I probably won't say top 10 when we have that conversation. But if Rob's doing that, they're for sure top 10. And now you've opened up a whole new good can of worms of like, well, what can this team be?
There's a ton of smart people that listen to this podcast. So actually, maybe selfishly they could do the research for me. But that is something I'm interested in. How to go back and look it up. A good team that just added like a rookie, not just a rookie or a lottery pick, but like a rookie point guard. Because
throw it in the chat.
I was thinking about this last night, and I was proved myself wrong. But I was like, hey, the Warriors were really good, and then they kind of just like, he's not a point guard or a lottery pick, but like they added Jordan Poole into the mix, and he ended up being like a valuable part down the road when they kind of win that other title. But I was like, I wonder what Jordan Poole's rookie year was like. Again, total apples and hand grenades here. The Warriors were 15 and like 50 that year. So that was a good answer. But I mean, it's the toughest position to play still. I mean, it is kind of the quarterback in the NBA and your rookie. And again, the undersized part, I'm actually less concerned about the more I just think about it or got to see him or talk to him and his drive and his energy and all that stuff. But just being like a backup point guard is also a tough role that takes some time to get used to. So yeah, to close the loop on my end on the question, if he comes out in the opposite lens and he's just really good, I can't see that being anything but just a godsend for Finch. Like, okay, I can cut everyone. I mean, he even talked about to Britt, can I bring everyone from like 35 minutes to 32 and from 33 to 30? Like, just fill some of those more minutes with Rob, especially early on if he shows he can handle it. Because, again, this team, and this is what I, as a fan or covering the team, and I think you and others too, this is the first year that this team really, and this will be interesting to ask about at Media Day and to kind of get the vibe. This is the first time in my entire life I can remember the message going into training camp kind of being championship or bust.
Sure.
Like, that wasn't what it was like 12 months ago. It was like, can we make the two bigs thing work? And if it's championship or bust, then the more they can get from their stars in spring, that's how they're going to kind of achieve that goal.
Cooper, you got another question for us? What's the outlook on Leonard Miller? I'd like to see a lineup of Dillingham, Ant, Jaden, Miller, and Cat/Nas. I would be pretty shocked if Leonard Miller plays this season.
I would too. But I don't think that's an indictment, though.
No, I don't. I mean, they got a bunch of bigs, and Finch has referenced Ingles playing, Shannon Jr. playing, even Josh Minot maybe playing. Leonard Miller isn't, and I think it's. I think for people who are hearing this and being like, wait, why? Or like, why Minot instead of Miller? The answer to that question, and you can disagree with it, but their answer to that question would be Miller is a big, and you can play, and if Minot can play, and if Shannon can play, they can play on the wing at the 3, and provide more where the Wolves will have a greater need. Now, knock on wood, if there's a bunch of injuries and stuff like that, could Leonard Miller get into the bigs rotation? Sure. But I think just if we're going top to bottom, guessing minutes, or I mean, Miller's 12th best case, right, in the pecking order.
And what do you always say? What position does Leonard Miller play in your mind?
Center.
Leonard Miller, this happened to me a couple months ago when I bought my house. Leonard Miller is that piece of furniture you buy when you're living in your apartment that you're not even going to have delivered until you move into your house. So like he's my couch, he's my sectional. I think Leonard Miller still will. I really believe in him. I think he's I think he's matured a lot. He's still very young. He has a lot to work on in his game. But I think he is what this team looks like in the next iteration, the next iOS of this. If they don't hang on to all 3 bigs next summer, is like, what if we got smaller but more athletic and like had even more spacing or more just transition player, guys that can run in gazelles. So it's a bummer now because you kind of want to see what you got in him. But I think Leonard Miller still has a purpose, but I think it's a contingency plan down the road when you maybe decide that the roster is just too expensive, regardless of how successful it is, that we want to pivot into some cheaper, different types of big guys.
Yeah, it's the speed thing. Like Ant and Jaden and Nas are like the speed movement of this team, and then theoretically Dillingham and Shannon and maybe Minot are that next wave of it, and then Miller would be too, in a third wave if they needed to, if they wanted to have
Cat or Nas, but on that lineup, give me a Dillingham, Ant, Terrence Shannon Jr., Jaden, Leonard Miller at the center. You know what I mean? Like that team's just going to
in 5 years.
Yeah. I'll be celebrating my 40th, but hey, that team's going to get out and run. So that's again, this isn't our opinions anymore. What we saw at Summer League, which I think Finch did a really good job of reminding us how stupid the Summer League is. But if it does come down to a 10th man, and he even said the Joe Ingles might not play every night or whatever, but right now it does seem like Josh Minot has pole position of any of those young guys to get a chance, at least early on, based on what he's done this summer or just based on his longevity of being here.
And not of any of the young guys, any of the young guys behind Dillingham and Shannon.
The benchmark.
Yeah. Another question, Coop.
I got this one from kid I used to coach soccer, Greg Olson. Shout out to Greg. What can we expect from...
start him at tight end.
He's the best analyst doing football, by the way.
He's great.
What can we expect from Nickeil Alexander-Walker this year? Should we expect continued growth? What more from him can we ask? I know Finch has said less is more with him, but can he add other... But what can he add other than improved three-point percentage? I'll take this one and throw it to you quick. He would be the guy that I'd be most concerned about.
Why?
Because if you had a pie and you had to cut some small piece to make room for everyone else as they get older and hungrier, he seems like the guy that you would cut. Because I still think, even though I want Mike to not play 76 games, he still is such a floor general adult father out there. You know, Ant and Jaden, I mean, Finch has kind of said it, right? Jaden's going to get a little more.
You're talking about this season, cutting him down?
If someone's role had to get cut in this 24-25 season, who do you think it would be more than Nickeil?
I mean, I just can't see Nickeil's. I mean, Nickeil did not have a very big role last year. Like the first half of the year, it was like 14 minutes. I mean, Dillingham, Shannon, Ingles, like I would say that. I mean, I just feel like Nas and Nickeil are locked at 6 and 7. Now, Nickeil has some volatility to his game. Could Nickeil have a slump and a bad stretch? And, now Finch isn't giving him that second rotation in the second half because maybe the 3-point percentage is down, but didn't he shoot like 39% last year? I don't know. Nickeil seems like a staple of this, and I don't understand why the rotation would need who's coming in that is going to be taking to answer your question with the question, right?
Right. Semantics. But I'm just saying that if someone had to decrease, I mean, there's a lot that goes into my answer here of like contract status and future with the team and all that stuff. I'm just saying, like, yes, Nas Reed, period, beach towel, 6th man of the year. I don't think it's just like a given that come Christmas, Nickeil's the 7th guy. I don't think that's as certain. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's kind of jumping out on. And again, I want to say
because
all this.
Because it's Dillingham? Is that?
Yeah, or maybe it's Terrence Shannon, or I mean, just there. I
guess. Yeah, I don't know. It was Kyle Anderson, the 7th man last year. To see Nickeil doing something, being a drastically different role that's lesser than last season. Given that if you just go look at his game log, not a lot of minutes in the beginning of the season. That's hard for. I thought where you were going at the beginning is like maybe not part of the long term thing here for sure. Like I could see that. I think he'll probably be out of their price range to be able to resign next summer and all that. Yeah. But I'm going the other way with it, where I think Nickeil Alexander-Walker might be the answer at backup point guard more than anybody else on the whole roster.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. And I thought Finch had really good answers there too about. If he is that role, we just need him to get guys in the sets, right? I mean, how many times I didn't need Finch to tell Britt about some of the fun passes that Nickeil made last season, that when I watched the pass, I turned on my TV to watch Finch's reaction and he was pulling out his hair. So, and again, I probably should have prefaced this earlier. I would love if the answer is Nickeil, who came here mid-season and then had probably his best season in the league last year, if he just built on top of that. Like, that's another one of those. If Nickeil plays 1.25 times better than he did last year, this team is going to win 55 games. I kind of do this thing as a fan sometimes too, where it's like, if you just think Jaden takes a leap and Nas is going to be even better and all these guys, like, who is going to sacrifice? And when I look at the rotation, and now it gets a little gray.
I just think it's Kyle, man. It's Kyle. He's gone.
Yeah, but how... Okay, that's fair. That
was 23 minutes a game.
I would love to see Nickeil. I mean, Nickeil kind of did close the season on a bummer, right? His shot just kind of fell apart. He wasn't I mean, I said to
So
you
did
in
Cat.
Yep.
So
No,
did Ant.
what did I say in March? Nickeil Alexander-Walker shoots 100% on like late shot clock threes, right? Where he just is
Right.
slide stepping. So it would be great if he did take a leap, but I would imagine, to Greg's question, it's more about just shooting, right? Because from a playmaking standpoint, I don't think that's what Finch even really wants.
Yeah, and that's what I don't know. Like, what does it look? How do they play the offense, or how does Nickeil run point guard if he's point guard out there? I just think there's a big reality this season where Mike Conley, who played like 2,300 minutes last season, plays 800
Yeah.
fewer minutes for
Mm-hmm.
whatever reason, and if you need to fill up those 800 minutes, like, yeah, we're gonna give some of those to Dillingham. But Dillingham already has like a pile of minutes allocated to him. Ingles get some of that. I think Nickeil has an opportunity if he can do that point guarding, which is totally up for debate. He's had big issues with turnovers in his career, and he's had big issues getting to the basket and finishing. And those might be things you have to do to be able to play point guard. But even if he can't do either of those things, he still could have the role from last season. Is kind of what my view is on that.
Would you bet me dinner that total minutes at the end of the season, Nikhil's played more total minutes than Rob?
Do I get the Nickeil side?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll take that bet.
Okay. Coop, write that down.
All right, another question.
Next question. From Alex Hoagie. Ant becoming a true transition bucket hunter feels like an easy path to 4 to 6 more points per game, but he's never shown that true attacking transition gear a la LeBron James or John Morant. Does that change in 2025? I think you should take that one.
Yeah, he just got to do it. That's an attention thing. Getting out in transition more. That's getting from the defensive side of the ball and being the first one to go the other way. Again, in this article that we're referencing every single time, like Finch said, direct quote, like, Ant doesn't get out and run much. Yeah, we're not a fast team. I think it was, we're not a fast team, and even our fast players like Ant don't run. Alec is completely right. Ant could be way more of a transition bucket hunter weapon than he is, or than he has been. That's just a decision, and probably a conditioning thing too, of having the ability to both defend and get out and go. I think this is where a Rob Dillingham, a Terrence Shannon Jr., no Kyle Anderson can help Ant. Just a group that's more frenetic, playing with more pace in general. I think that could just help Ant be the one who gets the hit ahead pass rather than being the guy who has to like get it and go all the way himself. It's absolutely a path for more efficiency for Ant, because those are the easiest, the easiest buckets, the highest quality buckets you can get are, in transition, or even semi-transition. We all know, like, the free ones, go take the free ones. And they do that. The Wolves already do that. They take the free ones. They don't take like the semi-transition,
the discounted ones. Yeah.
Yeah. That's where Ant could make a big leap. But I put that in the same bucket as the, like, yeah, man, that will work. Just like Cat on the pop or Rudy on the roll.
Yeah.
It's just it's that pattern recognition of a player who's still young, still learning on the fly. Right. And being able to make Ant knows these things. It's just hard to execute and do with consistency early on in your career. Hopefully transition intention is something that is more there in his career.
I know this is about Ant. I know this is about Ant, but I liked what Finch was saying too about letting Jaden kind of leak out a little bit more too. You have, you can't sit here and just rally about how much youth and athleticism this team has and then be 29th in transition or whatever. Like, especially when you're also maybe the best defensive team in the league. Like, something that doesn't add up. Like, you're getting these stops, you're forcing these turnovers with these bad shots, with long rebounds. Like, get out and get easy buckets. So, but that's another part. I mean, I think kind of my belief entering this season of all the seasons is just even heightened or more heightened expectations for Anthony Edwards.
100%.
Because being the face of the franchise in any sport to me is more than just like actually being the guy that's on the billboards. It's, can you just do all the other stuff, like the quarterback stuff that maybe doesn't get seen? So for him, it's, he will have to probably play a little harder to fill some of that Kyle Anderson defense that has left that you mentioned earlier. But he also needs to just single-handedly, to Alex's question, bring them up in the transition ranks. Like, just get out and run more, get easy baskets. That Grizzlies series,
be part of that identity shift, right? Be the change that you want to see or need to see.
I mean, that Grizzlies series will always stick in my mind of how many tough shots he took, and that's great. But you know what's even better? Easy shots, just like easy baskets. So, yeah, I think it all kind of does work together. But if this team is going to continue to have an identity of being great defensively, one of the easiest ways to increase that offense is just turn that into free points or discounted points. So, Coop, you got one more? You got it.
Dane or Kyle, in regards to challenging Western Conference opponents, who made the better move? Dallas acquiring Gafford and Washington, or the Thunder acquiring Hartenstein and Caruso? It's a good question. I haven't really thought about it that
Noah
way.
Welch. Obviously, Dallas makes those acquisitions at the deadline.
And it worked.
Yeah. No bleep. And then, obviously, the Thunder had maybe the best offseason in the West, maybe the best offseason in general, depending on what you think about what Philly did or just Boston bringing all their guys back. I just think in general, it's also kind of lazy, but I think in general, everyone every year just says the West got better. The West got better. And, Dallas, if we're looking at just the summer, Dallas goes and gets like Klay Thompson. They represent the West in the finals. They go get a shooter. What does Klay have left? I think what the Thunder did is actually, and I know the Thunder are kind of your closet team, so I can throw it to you here, but the Thunder addressed specific needs, like to go from Giddey to Caruso and to go from kind of no other real big and then go to Hartenstein. I mean, the Thunder are going to be really, really good, but kind of like the Wolves, they're now going to enter the season where no one's going to really care how good they are in January. I mean, it's, from my standpoint, like, okay, now you have to be good in April and May, and they weren't that good in the playoffs. So while the Thunder, I think, are going to be probably the favorites in the West on stuff, I just kind of look around at the West, and I think a lot of teams stayed neutral or took a slight step back or just got a little older in terms of like the Lakers of the league and the Warriors, and like we already saw the Kawhi news with the Clippers. So I don't think in general you can just paint everything and say the West got cumulatively better. And I think that's another reason why I'll be, and the number on the Wolves, what is it, 52.5 is so crazy, thinking about all the years where it was like 26.5. But I'll be bullish on them to just, again, this team has enough talent and youth to just chew up regular season wins while also lining up the dominoes to try to make another long run.
Yeah, to the Oklahoma City part, I think what people are sleeping on a little bit with Oklahoma City, that is the reason it might not be as good as everyone's saying it will be, is the inclusion of Hartenstein really changes the way that they have to play offense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I do watch the Thunder a lot. I like the Thunder. They played and have played and built an identity of playing 5-out offense, spread floor, drive and kick game that it seemed to like blow up out of nowhere last season, but they've been playing that style with so many of the same players for a long time that they got so comfortable with it that it just became dangerous. They were so good at playing 5-out, spread the floor offense. And that's why they got Gordon Hayward at the deadline. I know that didn't work, but like they wanted to stay that way while getting like a little bit like brawnier. And, whether Hayward was just washed is probably, obviously that was a big part of it was that. But the brawniness didn't help, and they were still bad at rebounding, right? They want to play that 5-out way, and I don't think they really wanted to get a 5 who was going to have to live inside of the arc. And Hartenstein is a great like perimeter pass. He's a really good passer. He's really good, like has really good spatial awareness on offense, but he is not just living at the top of the key like Chet did when he's at the 5. And I think there will be some growing pains for the Thunder, much like the Wolves had the first Gobert year of another body, quote unquote, in the way. Even if that body gets you more offensive rebounds, sets you better screens, does some of that stuff, it's just a change. And it might end up leading to the next, a better evolution of the Thunder. man, it's like they played one way, and it's gonna be a little bit different with Hartenstein in the mix there. And I don't think they're gonna be bad because of it or anything like that. But the Gafford and Washington thing proved to be like perfect fits for the system. And Hartenstein is a theoretical perfect fit for the Thunder. And that might prove to be the case, but that's the world where it's like there is a world, I should say, where this takes a little bit of, acclimation time, bringing in Hartenstein, and then, and Caruso too. Like is going to need to play within that system too. I mean, he's played for Oklahoma City before, and the G League team played under Dagnall, and I think they have a lot of confidence that he will fit that style, but they're going to be tweaking their style a little bit as well. Let's do a couple more quick ones here, Coop, before we're at 50 minutes. Maybe go like 8-10 more minutes.
By the way, that was a good answer for getting this next one about Dallas really just upgraded the pieces of their system, whereas OKC, I haven't really thought about that. OKC is going to actually have to kind of tweak their system.
We'll see. Right? Like I would think so. That I guess that's what we're thinking, is that they'll have to tweak it. Maybe Hartenstein maybe they want him to play that, that sort of way. I mean, you remember back in the day, like Sabonis that was in that Thunder system. I've always thought that that's like the guy that Sam Presti actually wants. And I think like in ways Hartenstein is kind of like has a poor man's Sabonis to him. I'm really interested to see that team. I just think everyone has crowned them the number 1 seed in the West, and I wouldn't do that. And I'm not saying that from a Wolves perspective. I'm not saying like the Wolves are going to get it. I just think this is all a lot closer in the West than people think. And what will determine it is probably injuries and some other things along the way there too. All right. Oh, we got another question.
This is from Weeby. Why does it feel like people are sleeping on Terrence Shannon Jr. even after he seemed more ready to contribute after his summer league performance than Dillingham? My 2 cents would be is that
who's sleeping? What?
Right. I said, well, I think he is coming into a team.
Weeby, did you go to Illinois? You went to Illinois.
That's a great follow-up, actually, because Illinois has some strong fans, and I've learned a lot about Terrence Shannon Jr. in these last couple of months. But we were there. We were in Summer League. We got to talk to these guys, watch them play. Terrence Shannon Jr. is older, physically bigger, and is probably ready or more ready to get NBA minutes than Rob Dillingham. My answer to this question is that Rob Dillingham serves more of a purpose or addresses more of a need than Terrence Shannon Jr. because we just went back and forth on what we think will happen with Nickeil's role, and Joe Ingles comes in, and Ant, and Jaden, and you think Nas, and I'm with you, Nas is probably better suited at the 3. That's like 5 or 6 really good wings, and again, unprovoked, Josh Minot, where it's like, where does Terrence Shannon Jr. fit in compared to Rob Dillingham, who's behind Mike? And if it's not Nickeil, who is behind Mike? It's Rob.
I see Weeby in the chat. Actually went to Vermont, or went to school in Vermont.
Clarify that you went to.
I was super impressed by Terrence Shannon Jr. In Summer League too. I mean, what was the thing that we said before Summer League? I go, it would be such a win at Summer League if you could leave Summer League being like, hey, I think Terrence Shannon Jr. might also be able to be a rotation guy, and that's exactly what happened. Is he impressed in Summer League enough to be like, yeah, this guy might be part of the answer next season. And that's where we're at it. Like, I don't know what more leash should Terrence Shannon Jr. get than like, hey, he might be the 9th man this year. Like that is a huge thing to be able to give, because we obviously know the starting 5 is the starting 5. They're locked into that. Naz Reid won 6th man of the year. Nickeil Alexander-Walker as the 7th man is extremely important to the defense, or at least was last season. Maybe an Illinois fan could say he's going to be better than Nickeil Alexander-Walker, but I don't know. Like, I think Nickeil earned that. And then they've said Rob's going to be in the rotation at backup point guard. So that's 8. Like, the only piece of the rotation, at least when it's fully available or fully healthy right now, is the 9th man role. And every indication from the film of the
Mm-hmm.
games and from what the coaches have said is that, yeah, Terrence Shannon Jr. is in the mix for the ninth man role. He also was 24 years old at Summer League. And like, that's probably part of the reason why he rampaged through Summer League, because Rob Dillingham, because he's 5 years older, or like 4.5 years older than Rob Dillingham. Like that's part of the reason. Or he's going to need to continue to prove it. To maybe, in all seriousness, to the like, why are people sleeping on him? Like, if there are people sleeping on Terrence Shannon Jr., and I see it, like emails and messages and stuff like that, where people are like, all right, easy on the Terrence Shannon stuff. Like, he was a 24-year-old at Summer League. Like, yeah, that is the pushback against it. But I don't know. I mean, yeah,
he made my summer so great. It was, imagine just like take away the fact of when you entered the draft and they make a draft night trade to get up in the lottery. If the Wolves just walked away this summer with Terrence Shannon Jr. in the draft and like just kind of swallowed, like, oh, we'll just use our late 20s pick and get this guy, like, you'd be pretty amped about it. So part of the reason he's overshadowed is because they also moved up and got a lottery pick, which again is very rare. The Terrence Shannon Jr. thing, I mean, he is such a dog and like such a great kid. And I don't want to downplay anything he did in the desert, but not only is he bigger and older than a lot of these other guys, the one thing that will stick out to me and I'll want to watch in preseason, because I'll imagine he'll get a lot of run, is that he was doing it, and no offense, but he was doing it with Jesse Edwards on the court. And a lot of times he got the ball and went straight to the rim, and there weren't two giant 7-footers kind of clogging the paint. I want to see Terrence Shannon Jr. catch and shoot more. And I think in Summer League, because he is bigger and older, he just got the ball and went straight to the basket. He's, fourth in college last year, you say, or at drawing fouls. His role, if he's going to carve out that ninth man and just get it for all 82, I think he's going to have to space a little more and be more selective when he decides to put the ball on the ground, because this team doesn't really need a lot of that. Like, in this flow, like they're going to get you shots in the corner or shots in the slot.
He needs to be able to shoot and guard on the wing. And he didn't do either of those things at Summer League. And really what he did at Summer League was he didn't. I mean,
no one
what he
guards
did
in
at Summer League.
Yeah.
Sure. And it was an awesome first Summer League game. And it was awesome. And it's just games 2, 3, and 4. And I don't think and then he didn't play in the fifth one. Maybe he didn't even play in the fourth one. Like, it really was. It was a bang. Like, it was the first quarter and the first game, starting with the first quarter, and for the first game, Terrence Shannon Jr. like, okay, he's here. Then it did trickle off some, for the rest of Summer League, and so I think he has more stuff to prove. But yeah, I still left Summer League with the feeling of like, yeah, maybe this is the ninth man on the team, and that is I think that's about as high of praise as he could have had coming out.
Really good. I mean, you don't see a lot of valuable picks late in the 20s, and it's early, and we'll redraft down the road. But he that's a good pick so far. I mean, they got two guys that can score, and now if they can just again buy into some of the identity of what this team is built on, defense, they're going to be really good picks. Coop, can we close it out with one more? Ooh, this is a fun one to close with.
We should probably read it. Welcome back, guys. Who is the favorite to emerge as the eighth guy in a playoff rotation? I mean, so we're doing the starting five. We're doing Daz as the sixth, and Nickeil as the seventh. I mean,
yeah. So I mean, if this is an easy one, you'd think, right, from Super Mrs. David, you would just say it's Rob, because he'll be the backup point guard. He'll have had a lot of seasoning playing 82 games or whatever. And I've pushed back. I think the answer right now in late September is probably Joe Ingles.
I was just saying that if we're making a case that it isn't Rob Dillingham, you could say, okay, like Mike's going to play 36 minutes a game in the playoffs, right? Mm-hmm. And then if Rob is a rookie and even in the playoffs, you're like, maybe this isn't, or maybe it's a series where there's not a matchup of somebody he can guard, right? You could probably survive the other 12 minutes with Ant as the point, but he's probably going to then need another Kyle Anderson-like player next to him. And so then that goes back to the, like, can it be Nickeil, or is it just Joe Ingles? Like another guy to kind of slow it down, that can handle, that is a good passer, can get you into some stuff, and also just be a shooting weapon out there. Like, yeah, it would make sense that Joe Ingles' skill set and age would be most valuable, in the playoffs, right? And in that type of role. And yeah, if it's not Dillingham, I would say Ingles too. Obviously, open up the possibility that Terrence Shannon Jr. has an incredible rookie season, and I mean that stuff's happened too. But I mean, the answers are Rob or Ingles.
Just on the topic of Joe Ingles, since we're an hour in and we're trying to wrap this up, but we kind of, for being a transaction, right? I know he was on a minimum, but that was kind of one of the highlights of their offseason in terms of making moves. I kind of just poo-pooed it because I am an honorary Illinois fan, and I believe in Terrence Shannon Jr. And then obviously Joe doesn't really do much in the Olympics for Team Australia. But did you get the sense from reading the 4 pieces from Britt and Finch that Finch is pretty amped about having Joe Ingles on the team?
Yeah, I think what that is Finch was very scared to lose Kyle Anderson and how that would impact the group, and that it would be if they just lost him. Yeah, if they lost, I mean, as a communicator, as an offensive player, as a defensive player, all those sort of things. If they would have lost him without replacing those Kyle things, I think Finch would have been really concerned about this season. And I think he feels that Joe Ingles can replace a lot of those things. And maybe not all of them, right? But rather than your Kyle Anderson cup being empty, I think like Ingles pours some more of that into Finch's cup and gives him sort of, again, that binky. We would always say that that's what Kyle Anderson was. Like, all right, like that maybe it's you or Jace would joke about like something goes bad and Finch just turns to Kyle and just like says, get in there. He doesn't even tell him who to sub in for. It's just like, you need to go into the game. There was a stability that fit, and a lot of people didn't like Kyle Anderson, but we're talking about what Finch thought. I am 100% certain that's how Finch thought about Kyle Anderson, and was scared of losing that. And I think theoretically Ingles, though 37 years old, replaces some of that there too.
I just wanted to confirm my own thoughts because I thought that too. I took away like, hey, you know what? We've kind of slept on Joe Ingles and how much he has left. And again, I don't really care about who did or did not play in the Olympics, but I got that sense too that Finch feels better at night having Joe Ingles because again, like Tyus Jones aside, who signs in Phoenix for the minimum, there were some good players out there that I just, were interesting, right? Like Markelle Fultz or Lonnie Walker or stuff. And I think Finch would rather, whether those guys have more talent or more upside or whatever, I think Finch still needed that, your term, like binky out there, just when things don't go right on a Tuesday night in November or December, who can he trust to kind of right the ship if Mike's on the bench? And I think that'll be Joe Ingles. So I also know Finch said he might not play all the time, but I think come playoff time, that 8th man, if I had to put an odds on it right now, he would be the favorite to kind of secure that 8th spot. So
he's also an insane shooter. Like I feel like, and I'm guilty of this too. We talk about like all these, we talk about his age. We talk about like, oh, he's kind of like a big point guard. We talk about how he can't defend anymore. We talk about how he used to be a good defender. We talk about his connection with Mike and Rudy. Joe Ingles is a fucking shooter. Like he is, I mean, he is one of the best shooters in the NBA of the past 10 years. And like, that is a skill set that is going to translate to the corner.
I didn't know if we could swear on YouTube Live, but I also want to say the thing that he brings to the table that I love, because they lost some of this, he's also a fucking asshole. And I love that. Like, your team needs that. Like, you think if Rudy Gobert's getting choked out again, Joe Ingles is swinging. Yeah. And I love that. So they didn't lose any edge, and I think Finch kind of reiterated that too. So it's going to be fascinating.
Can I tell a quick Joe Ingles story? I remember this.
Why'd you wait an hour? You should have started with
No, I literally just remember this to the asshole part.
In a good way.
It was Ricky Rubio's first game back when he was on the Jazz playing at Target Center. And obviously all of us in the media want to interview, and all the TV people are there to interview Ricky. And Ricky's like literally the nicest guy ever. And Joe Ingles the whole time, as Ricky's doing his interview there, and you can like hear it in the background. If you like find it there he's like, why are you talking to these people, Ricky? They abandoned you. They didn't want you, Ricky. What are you doing here, Ricky? Like, and if you remember how that kind of went with Tibbs and stuff, like that is what happened. Because I'm talking about, like This is probably like 2018 or
Mhm.
something like that. And it was like he wasn't just joking around. Like he was like he's like, and I think I tweeted this out somewhere, but I just watched like all of his clips from the Cavs Magic playoff series, and he just fights on the floor. Like
I love it.
Like
I love it.
when guys just do the little, like, literally they're not even like digging their knuckles into his ribs. Just watch this when Joe Ingles gets on the floor for the first time. If anybody just touches him, he just slaps them. He just slap, like he's on offense, right? And they're just like, they're like ready for him to cut or whatever, which he's probably like, stop. He's like, you think I'm going to cut here? I can't move. But he is just, yeah, he's a dog. He's a dog. I think he's going to be, people are going to love him and find him to be hilarious. Like,
I know we talk a lot about on the court stuff, but something that sticks in my mind that I'll miss, about Kyle is you walk into the Timberwolves home locker room, and the first locker slot is Kyle Anderson. Mm-hmm. And I was saying, I hope they put Rob's locker next to Mike Conley's, and I think maybe they did that this year, but I hope Joe Ingles' locker is that first locker slot when you walk in.
It's the old Wiggins spot.
Yeah, because that kind of sets the tone for that locker room. And Kyle Anderson had a big part in setting. Yeah, you kind of just made my joke for me. No, I don't think he might play as much in the regular season as you, and we'll see what happens. But for a minimum contract to get that shooting, the things you just emphasized, but also that's a great story, by the way. That this team still lacks a little edge, and to replace Kyle with Joe is going to be exciting. So
they wanted to sign him a year ago too. They offered him $7 million 2 years ago, and he got 11 from the Magic. Like they've wanted him. They like the idea of how he fits not only into the Mike and Rudy part of this, but the Finch part of it specifically too, in that same sort of like Kyle Anderson mind meld sort of deal. Obviously there's a big risk because he's 37. Yeah. But at the minimum, I'm taking, that's a good bet. I like that bet. And I think they love that bet internally.
Ask me again. I'm ready now. Like I'm pretty amped for like Timberwolves media day and training camp. Like it's
coming.
Again, it was 90 degrees here yesterday, so I just took the day off and laid out by the pool. But fall is coming, winter is coming, and I think this team, we've kind of highlighted that tonight on this one, and you'll kind of talk about it on Friday. But I think the team does have some questions that we got to focus on for these next couple of weeks as they start to kind of figure out each other. Seems like all the guys are already in town, ready, working out together before training camp even officially starts. So still some questions to be asked. They have to prove it. Again, one big thing for me is they're no longer the hunter, they're the hunted. And we'll see how they respond. But man, I'm excited for the 24-25 Timberwolves.
Me too, man. I'm excited to see you on Monday out here for Media Day. Kyle and I will do instant reaction to Media Day pod on Monday night. So that'll be coming, I guess, Monday night or Tuesday morning. But Britt and I are actually going to talk on Friday too. We really only talked about the first two parts of it. So if you didn't like how often we referenced the Britt and Finch interview in this episode, don't listen on Friday. But Britt's gonna come back on Friday. We'll talk a little bit more about the rest of his interview with Finch that we didn't get to on Monday. Thanks for doing it, Kyle. You guys can follow Kyle on Twitter at Kyle Tigey, and you can listen to him over on Flagrant House with Phil Mackey as well. Thank you all for listening in here, jumping in on the live stream as well. We'll try and do some more of this during the season, maybe after some road games that I'm not at too. This was fun. But yeah, until Friday with Britt, he's Kyle, I'm Dane. Peace out.